Oh shit, it's time to dip back to the lab for just a little bit more degreelessness this week, boys and girls. And this time, we're taking on the saddest trash fire on Earth, the modern day MCU. Gasp, I know. I'm your host, the last Boy Scout, high-tech lowlife, and the people's champion, Shanghai Pete. Now, I know we usually do video games around here, but my most recent ill-advised sojourn back into the gaping maw where value goes to die, otherwise known as the MCU, was so scarring, so traumatizing, that I found I just couldn't shut the fuck up about it. So, better roll on up, kids, cause it's story time. Against my better judgment, recently I sat down with some people to watch the first episode of Moon Knight. Before we go any further, full disclosure, I haven't liked anything from the MCU since Avengers Endgame. I thought the decision to kill off the two characters that were not only essentially the face of, but also who led your entire franchise in one movie without doing any background work to build up or prepare a successor was beyond retarded. A move of such catastrophic ineptitude, I could scarcely believe what I was seeing. You killed off fucking Iron Man and Captain America without even setting up Doctor Doom and the Fantastic Four or the X-Men? What in the good fuck? What is wrong with you guys? Did you really think this pathetic display of focus grouped, over-edited, formulaic, and algorithm committee designed garbage you're laughably calling Phase 4, as if you ever had any actual plan, was gonna cut it? And with these characters that no one cares about or has ever even heard of? I mean, not that low-tier characters can't be good, but they need time to be built up and introduced. And can't just drop them off out of nowhere and expect that all it'll take to get people to like them is some "but my MCU" throwaway associations. I mean, the Eternals guys? Really? With the guy from Silicon Valley? I mean, yo, he was good as a fucking programmer in an HBO comedy, but man, like that guy alongside Rob Stark, I mean, come the fuck on. Remember, there was a Hulk movie, a Captain America movie, a Thor movie, and 2 Iron Man movies before we got even one Avengers movie. Doing this kind of shit takes time. You can't toss out Iron Man, the face of your fucking franchise, one moment, and then expect anyone to give a shit about Shang-Chi and the 7 whatever the fucks the next second without any preamble or build-up. It's this exact kind of nauseating, unabashed, naked hubris that is ruining what is left of the MCU. From that ridiculous Loki show, which I could barely stomach 2 episodes of, to Hawkeye, which looks so fucking cringe I didn't even watch the first episode, and WandaVision, a gimmick that never should have gotten past the writer's room, to the almost pretty dope but fell apart due to one of the worst villains I've ever seen, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, to say nothing of the disastrous recent movies. Phase 4 of the MCU is quickly attaining heights of self-destruction only matched by Season 8 of Game of Thrones. Yeah, it's that bad. Maybe I'll do a whole video getting deep inside why exactly there's less and less of the MCU left with each passing day, but that's not for today. I just thought it'd be helpful to give a little background on where I'm coming from before we get deep inside Moon Knight. You'll notice that one of the words I used to describe the attitude and actions of the current stewards of the MCU was hubris. Now, this really says it all. It speaks quite loudly, in fact. The main glaring problem staring wide-eyed and unblinking back at customers and fans alike since the beginning of Phase 4 is completely defined by this one word: hubris. The current landscape of the MCU is exactly what it looks like when the people steering the ship are so drunk on their own greatness, so completely blinded and captivated by the thoughtless perfection of their own huge swinging dongs between their legs, that they think they can do no wrong. Needless to say, it's when people get like this that they do the most wrong, that they can cause the most damage. And good God in heaven, that is exactly what's brought us to this new sad low and the environment and world unto which Disney's Moon Knight was birthed. This latest travesty perpetuated against a once awesome comic book character is the exact type of emotionless, cardboard, cookie-cutter, stale drivel that you would come to expect from Phase 4. It's a barely coherent, trope-ridden mishmash of the most formulaic television I've ever had the displeasure of seeing. And we're going to talk about why. Oh, and real quick, one last thing. Beyond a crossover run of about 7 issues or so in Amazing Spider-Man back in the 90s, I don't know shit about Moon Knight, so factor that in accordingly. Alright, here we go. So, right out the gate here, this shit makes approximately 0 sense. You see the main character waking up and unfastening a strap from around his ankle. He then goes on to take some tape off the door and mope about his apartment feeding a fish, sporting your average Zoomer-style nondescript yet slightly haunted expression. Ooh, how edgy. I imagine the average person is supposed to be mulling over a few basic low IQ questions about the protagonist at this point. You know, why is he doing this? Does he have some type of illness? Is he a danger to himself? Questions which anyone with a brain larger than the aforementioned goldfish would immediately note are nonsensical, as anyone with any sort of condition like this in our modern era would likely have a personal physician on call and at the very least be heavily medicated. But no sign of any pill popping or doctor calling so far. What we are treated to instead is a sad yet predictable montage of your most basic weak, powerless male tropes. He misses the bus, makes a cringy, half-hearted comment to a woman who mostly ignores him, and awkwardly avoids eye contact with others on public transit. People in general talk down to him, and naturally he's immediately emasculated and ridiculed by his strong woman boss the moment he gets into work. Yes, all the classics are here. He makes an awkward pass at someone at work, fumbles with his name tag, and just generally stutters while he toils away at his obviously not important job at a museum gift shop. And as if that weren't enough to drive the point home, nope, we're still not done hammering this right into your fucking brain just how pathetic and non-threatening this protagonist is. The resentment the show's creators have for his unavoidable maleness is practically dripping off of every frame. This dude's British accent itself is even a trope. Watch this shit and tell me he doesn't sound exactly like fucking Hugh Grant bumbling his way across a rom-com set. And quick sidebar here, I'm by no means saying that there's something inherently wrong with the bumbling, harmless dork trope. It's just as legitimate a storytelling method or character trait as anything else. What I have a problem with is that it's always the same one, especially in the MCU. Like, I get it, we're not going back to the days of 80s jacked up square-jawed action heroes spraying bullets and smashing bitches every 5 seconds. We need to inject a little more nuance in our male protagonists these days. That's fine. I just disagree with the idea that it always has to be in the same predictable one note deep as a fucking kiddie pool framework. Do they always have to be this same meek mumbling and bumbling buffoon that even a goldfish wouldn't find threatening? It's just so fucking lazy, like everything else from the MCU these days, coincidentally. We eventually get this moron home from work, where we then see him desperately trying to keep himself awake by doing things that would quite obviously have the exact opposite effect on any normal person. Like, in what universe would things like reading a book or trying to solve a puzzle do anything but put you directly to sleep? Now, I know I'm nitpicking here, but be honest, that's probably why you're watching this video to begin with. Now, of course, he falls asleep anyway, and the scene immediately shifts to him waking up in a field somewhere near some type of castle where guys with automatic weapons are inexplicably trying to use them to murder him. He runs into the nearest town, which for some reason is both within 30 seconds walking distance and simultaneously beyond earshot of gunfire, but whatever. Now, upon entering the town, a metal scarab thingy that just sort of appeared in his pocket starts talking to him in a fashion disappointingly not dissimilar in tone or manner from the absurd Venom voice in Eddie Brock's head in those movies. Mercifully, this is far less cringe, but not quite any better. And things don't improve much from there, as Ethan Hawke, an actor who approximately no one born after 1990 would recognize, shows up dressed in perhaps the least imaginative generic monk costume that I have ever seen. He then proceeds to murder an old woman from under the watchful eye of two of the most goonish looking goons imaginable, who for some reason are wielding assault rifles despite Ethan Hawke's ability to murder old women with nothing but a stern look and a goofy dancing tattoo on his forearm. Oh no, how horrifying, how terrible, what the fuck ever. Evil monk Ethan Hawke then notices our pathetic, middling non-hero and demands he hand over the talking metal scarab thing. Some scuffles ensue, which they couldn't be bothered to show, in which presumably he blacks out in his other personality, I guess. And I say I guess because still at 20 minutes in, it has not been made clear. Takes over and then kicks everybody's ass. Again, assumedly. The charming and not at all incongruous scene ends with Hugh Grant hijacking a cupcake truck and ingloriously fleeing down the winding roads of where the fuck ever, and featuring stunning action shots like this one of him fending off his attackers with frosted confections. So, cupcake fight. Thrilling. We then rejoin Captain Dorko as he once again wakes up confused in his apartment. Now at this point, you're really forced to reckon with a few things, namely, what the fuck is wrong with this idiot, and maybe what the fuck is wrong with me that I'm still watching this. See, remember, the first scene in the show is him going through what appears to be a well-worn routine of preparing himself for bed, strapping himself in, taping up the door, locking deadbolts, etc. So the takeaway is that you think you, the audience, is supposed to assume that this is a condition that this guy has been living with for a while. After all, he's developed a whole routine around managing it. Okay, fine. Yet he seems unendingly confused by the fact that he keeps blacking out and losing time. Why? Even the most fantastical fictional worlds need to maintain a certain internal logical consistency, or else everything starts to fall apart, as this show is so aptly demonstrating here. Anyways, after being forced to watch Oscar Isaacs bumble his way through his best Hugh Grant impression for a few more minutes, we come upon yet another scene that struggles to remain coherent. Seems the first thing our protagonist does after the whole Ethan Hawke cupcake battle over the metal scarab thing is rush right out on a date he's not even sure he really has. He sits alone at a table, doing his best to look as unattractive as possible with a sad bouquet of the world's most unnecessary flowers draped pathetically on his lap. Where is my date, he wonders. Why isn't she here? He then picks up his phone to call her, which, as we all know, has a screen whose primary focus is displaying the time and date, and then proceeds to act utterly and completely baffled that it's not in fact Friday as he thought, but instead Sunday. As though he expected to have teleported from Monk, Ethan Hawke, Switzerland murder village or something. There's some indication that maybe he's supposed to have thought that was all a dream, but how the fuck does that make any sense for a character that we're told has based his entire lifestyle off this issue he has with blacking out and losing time? Knowing this about him, wouldn't you think that he'd be more inclined to think that it was real? Certainly not less. Anyways, after struggling through a few more excruciating ordeals where storytelling logic is tortured to its breaking point, we finally, after more than 30 minutes, get some glimpse of his assumed other personality beyond the goofy disembodied Venom voice. And we get it in the form of an archaic flip phone filled with missed calls from someone named Layla. Yes, compelling. This is followed by a few more minutes where we're subjected to sloppy implementations of the shadowy guy in the mirror talks to you trope, and then a few more where hot Hugh Grant bumbles ineffectually away from a big beak monster of some type. This inelegant display is interrupted by yet another blackout which resumes with this fucking moron on his way to work again for some reason. Once at work, we're treated to even more lazy trope spitballing where we're forced to yet again watch helplessly while tan Hugh Grant, of course, decides to try to explain to his coworkers about the totally real and believable big monster chasing him, because that always works out so well, right? And it goes exactly how you'd expect. He's ignored and brushed off, as is apparently so typical of this character that you're forced to wonder why the fuck he would be seeking help from his coworkers to begin with. Because we all know that's the first thing everybody does when confronted with some horrifying revelation or life-threatening scenario, right? Go to work. And surprising exactly no one, not only does this brilliant strategy of ask my coworkers who hate me to save me from the monster not work, but even worse, Ethan Hawke in his boring monk costume show up, and tagging along is of course his dancing tattoo. Frantically, the intrepid Captain Dorko looks desperately around for any refuge, but instead tragedy strikes and all he finds is yet another lazy trope. This time it's the much beloved, oh no, they're all with him. Yes, the staff and apparently all the security guards of this London museum are part of the Ethan Hawke spooky monk of the dancing tattoo cult. Oh no. With no escape in sight, our hero is trapped with the evil yet somehow boring long-haired super monk who is just settling into his whole my tattoo will murder you if it doesn't like you thing when somehow the act of some doors opening in the background somewhere allows him to escape. As Hugh Grant meekly runs for his life, he's brutally assaulted by poorly modeled, vaguely Egyptian-looking Anubis 3D dog CG things. Only the best for Disney Plus, guys. Shockingly, the brilliant strategy of knock over the bookcase doesn't stop the supernatural monsters, and eventually the not-so-heroic Mr. Grant is cornered in a bathroom of all places where he has no choice but to finally embrace his other personality so he can beat up the mean dogs as Moon Knight. Once again, we're asked to believe that even though this is apparently an issue, condition, whatever, that this guy has been dealing with for long enough to have built a preventative routine around it and blacked out and lost time enough for it to become commonplace, this is the first time he's behaving as though he's truly aware that he has another personality. Surprise, surprise. And even worse, as is the case for so many of these shows, we're told, not shown, that this moment is supposed to have some sort of gravitas. Needless to say, it does not, and falls almost completely flat. It is partially salvaged at the last minute though by virtue of the Moon Knight costume miraculously looking pretty fucking dope, which is easily the most surprising plot twist in this entire 45-minute episode. The writing and dialogue on display here are the worst kind of lazy modern schlock, and the storytelling is a tortured miasma of broken logic and incoherent internal consistency, propped up by an army of the most utterly low-effort textbook tropes imaginable. Stylistically and from a cinematography perspective, this looks exactly like every other modern MCU Disney Plus show thing, as boring and plain as an empty blank beige wall. As we were watching this one, my friends wondered aloud why they even bothered to get different directors to do this stuff, because the style guides of visual tone, scene language are all so completely indistinguishable from each other and interchangeable that there's absolutely no room for any individual artistic flair or contribution on the part of the director or probably anybody else. And he was completely right about that. Look at any scene from this, Hawkeye, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, WandaVision, or any of the recent movies, and you'll find that they all feel exactly the same. They look exactly the same. They're practically identical. Ironically, the only recent MCU product that turned out to be good in any way was the one thing that a year or so ago I was sure was going to be garbage. The What If series. Not all of it, of course, but the two-parter What If Ultron 1 plus that Doctor Strange episode were fucking insanely awesome. Easily an 8 or 9 out of 10. A far cry from this travesty though, which gets a "you only just barely convinced me to stick around for episode 2" score of 4 out of 10. I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not. Alright, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching and spending this little bit of your free time with us tonight. We love you today. We love you all the way. Was this fun, hearing my perspective on this kind of stuff, or would you prefer I shut the fuck up about it so I don't ruin my video game content for you with my MCU hot takes? Let me know in the comments. I actually enjoyed making this for y'all, unlike slogging through this Moon Knight episode, which I most certainly did not enjoy. But all that being said, I'd definitely be down to make more vids like this, doing more movie show reviews, branching out, so to speak. So if you guys think that'd be cool, let me know in the comments down below, and we'll see whether or not I have to watch episode 2.
Woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I'm back down.